This video will serve as an introduction to radicals. So here's your basic generic layout. The N is called the index. A is called the radicand. And the symbol itself is just called a radical. And an easy way to memorize this, the N is what goes on the inside. So I always have memorized it with the N in radicand. Just that's the piece of this the piece of the expression that goes underneath the radical symbol. You can see the square roots that I've given you here. I don't have a sign written outside of any of these. So if no sign is indicated, it's assumed that you're looking for the positive or principal square root. So if your problem is to simplify or find the square root of 25 and you have nothing indicated here in front, it's assumed that you're only looking for the positive or principal root, as opposed to if you had a problem like this with a negative sign in front, then your answer would be -7, simply because you take the square root of 49, but the symbol out here is telling you to give me the opposite. But if nothing is indicated, then you just give the positive root. If no index is written, then it's assumed, so you can see here, there's no number written in the radical symbol. You assume that you're looking for the second root, or what's called the square root. So when no index is given, it's assumed that you're looking for the square root. And the index tells you the number of times that a factor should appear in order for it to be considered a root. So if I have the square root of 4, 4 is 2 times 2. And here no index is given, so it's assumed that I'm looking for the square root. And that's telling me the number of times that a factor should be multiplied times itself in order to be the perfect square. So here the square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 25, well 25 is 5 times 5, or you may choose to think of it as 5 squared. And then the square root of 25 is 5, because 25 is the same number multiplied times itself 2 times. And I've listed some of the first few perfect squares. 64 is 8 times 8, so the square root of 64 is 8. The square root of 100, well 100 is 10 times 10, so the number 10 multiplied times itself twice to match the index. So the square root of 100 is 10. And I would ask you to go through and complete any that I didn't catch on the video. Let's look at simplifying non-perfect roots. And it helps if you have the first few perfect squares memorized. So 1 times 1, 2 times 2, 3 times 3. When you're simplifying a radical, you're looking for the largest perfect square factor. So 24 is 4 times 6. The square root of 24 is 2. So you can think of it as I now have a product. I have the square root of 4 times the square root of 6. My perfect square is 4. So I would think of the square root of 4 as 2 and then radical 6. That would be my simplified answer in what's called reduced radical form. So I'm not looking for a decimal answer. I'm looking for reduced radical form. And that's a skill in and of itself, being able to simplify a radical. Let's look at 48. 48 is 16 times 3. So that's the square root of 16 times the square root of 3. 16 is the perfect square, so I would simplify that as 4 radical 3. That would be my simplified answer for the square root of 48. Let's look at number 6. The square root of 175. Well, 175 is 25 times 7. 25 is your perfect square, 7 is not a perfect square. So the reduced radical form for this answer would be 5 radical 7. And I'll let you look at the rest of those on your own.